It feels like there are more people than ever applying for jobs. If you're watching this video, chances are that sometimes it feels like you're throwing a rock out into the ocean, hoping that, something sticks. Matt, you've hired dozens of devs, if not hundreds. You've read hundreds, thousands of applications in your lifetime.
Absolutely.
If somebody came to you today in 2024 and asked you, how can they stand out when applying for a job as a Laravel developer? What would you tell them? Where would you start?
The main thing I would do is understand the job you're applying for and build an application for that job. If somebody sends the same job application to 500 different people, it's going to look like you sent the same application to 500 different people. So whether that's the cover letter being unique, whether that's your resume being contextualized for the type of job you're applying for, whether that's even like building a little standalone site or something like that, or making sure that your website that your resume links to is actually relevant for not only the current moment, but also the type of job you're applying for in the current moment. Any of those things, it's almost like the inverse. It's like what makes you not stand out. There's a lot of things that make you go on the cutting floor. And so you gotta really address those things first.
Well, we could start with some of those if you want. I mean, I know that from reading lots of resumes in my life and going through them, basic things like spelling, grammar, addressing every instruction that the application gives you. I'm sure you might have some as well that I'm missing here.
I mean, consistency is one. It's both grammatical consistency, visual consistency. One of the things that's really important for us to know when we look at a job application is that someone has an attention to detail. Because if I'm going to keep you on my team, not having to read every single thing you do to make sure you do it right, then you've got to read every single thing you do to make sure you do it right, which means you've got to get that attention and say like, oh, well, that thing is done the same way as that one, or I remember to do this on that or whatever. And if you can't do it on an application that might have an impact to the tune of, over the span of your career, potentially millions of dollars on your life, then you're certainly not going to do it for some line of code on some, individual project that you're working on for 3 months or something like that. So if you can't really focus your energy on something that's this important, I don't trust you to focus your energy on something that feels less important to you.
You mentioned even having like a custom like website or a custom thing part of the application. That might sound kind of intense, but I mean, I know that I remember you and there's a couple I can think of in my life where I've thought, oh, wow, like that really stood out. Why do you think that really resonates so much? Is it just a show of effort? Is it like a chance to get a glimpse of personality? What is it?
It's a little bit of everything, but one of the most important things is like the first thing I mentioned was I don't want to look at an application that looks like you sent this in 500 different places.
Yeah.
You stand out if we stand out to you, if that makes sense. And so if this job is unique and special to you as an idea, then let me know it's unique and special. And if it's not, that's fine. Every job you apply for, it doesn't have to be a special snowflake for you. But if if this is like your dream job and you're like, well, I maybe applied 50 places, but this is the one I really want, let them know it, write a special custom cover letter for them. And that's the thing is, the people who built those one-off websites saying, this is me applying to Titan, it was because Titan was their dream job. And so they wanted that to be clear. And it made it clear because they put that effort in. We got to know them more as people. It just really was a way of communicating the importance, because nobody's going to do that for every single place they apply.
Yeah. And to piggyback off that, I would say if you are passionate about, and hopefully, ideally you're passionate about the jobs you're applying for, but I understand sometimes you're in a spot where you're like, I just need to get a job or whatever.
And that's fine.
If you have a chance to just look up basics about the company, that also can help quite 100%. A bit, right? Yeah. I mean, if you can actually know who the hiring manager is, that's always a little nice. But even just things like showing somewhere in the process, whether it's the resume or the cover letter, hinting, even outright saying, I've read your website, or at least I'm aware, like, do I know things about this company? Like, it makes it feel like, oh no, I didn't just like check a button on a website that let me like auto import my stuff and like send it off to you. I actually like thought about it and I looked you up, and those things matter. Care, time and energy, right?
Yeah. And if I'm spending, dozens and dozens of hours, this week alone, looking through people's portfolios and trying to get to know them and understand who they are as people, and then that person hasn't spent but 2 hours, just looking over my website trying to figure out who I am as a hiring person, not me, but like the company, then it really feels like there's an imbalance of effort and energy. When I have 500 people applying and I'm putting more effort on you than you are to my one job, and again, it's not like you only have one job you're applying for. So again, if you're just sending out 500 job applications just trying to get a freaking job, well, that's fine, but then you can't really ask questions in that moment of how do I stand out, right? You're like, I'm not trying to stand out here, I'm just trying to get as many in and hope one of them kind of works.
I'm trying to think if there's anything that we missed on the like how to stand out in a bad way. right?
Yeah. So one of the most common ones is things being out of date, things being unclear in any way, shape, or form, linking to things that are not helpful, like wasting time. So if you give me a resume that doesn't tell me anything about your ability to do the current job, maybe it's a resume that you had in a different industry or that's out of date, that's not going to be helpful for me. If you link me to a website and I go there and it's the website that you set up in college for some kind of college degree program, and that was 6 years ago and everything's out of date, like, please don't waste my time.
Right.
So, but yeah, I would say attention to detail, things being up to date, things being correct, type, your I don't want typos. I don't want grammatical issues, because like, it's okay that you're not a perfect communicator. Although as a remote company, we need people who are effective written communicators. But you at least can use Grammarly on things that matter like this. Again, it's just the same thing. It's like how important is this to you, especially on a resume or a website that will be sent exactly in the same form to all 500 places you're applying to. Even if you're a bulk applier, you could still just do that once, right? So if you don't do that once, then your consideration for the quality of the things you're putting out can't be that high.
Last question for you. Do you think that things like social media or GitHub might even be a separate thing, but just sort of like your public presence aside from a website, whether that's GitHub or Twitter or LinkedIn or anything like that, how much do you pay attention to that in terms of like standing out?
You don't have to have it, but if you have it, it will be considered. And that's your LinkedIn, that's your Twitter, that's sometimes your Instagram, if that's something you link to. It's basically, what do you link to from your site? So if your site links to those things, we're going to consider it. If you are active in the spaces that we are active in, for Titan, that's primarily Twitter and secondarily LinkedIn, then we're also going to pay attention to those things. So if you don't have them, I'm not going to ding you for not having a LinkedIn or a Twitter. But if you have them, and you're being a jerk, or if you have them and you're being helpful and kind, or if you have them and you're engaging in conversation and sharing things, all of those can have a really big impact on us getting to know you as a person. So it's sort of like a lot of companies that like paid to set up a blog and then never put something on the blog. It'd be better if the blog wasn't there in the first place. It's fine if your Twitter doesn't have anything on it, so it's not that same constraint. But if you're using Twitter positively or negatively, it will have an impact on the job. GitHub, you're right to say that GitHub is different. I would say I'm not one of those people who says, oh, if you don't have a huge commit history on your GitHub, then whatever. Like, there's been plenty of time where I don't, because everything I'm doing is private, or everything I'm doing is non-coding work. There's just so many ways where a not impressive GitHub is not a concern, but an impressive GitHub is a benefit. So
it helps.
I wouldn't say someone needs to build out their GitHub. But a way to set yourself apart is if I go to GitHub and you've got one of those like custom landing pages for your GitHub profile. It's like, hey, I'm this person and I'm working on this, and here's my 3 most important projects. And I go to those projects and they're updated, or I see that you have contributions to a major tool that I actually really like using, or you knew you were applying to my job and you sent in a very, very, very valuable pull request to one of my projects the week beforehand. I'm like, okay, like I understand what you're like as a coder. I would say one of the hardest things to find out in the job hiring process for developers is how well do you code today in the tech stack we're working in. And the best way to show that is open source. So you don't have to do open source, but if you want to set yourself apart, either contributions to or creations of your own open source work allows me to review your code actively as it would be if you're working on a project today. And that is invaluable.
I was going to say bonus points if the company you're applying to has open source projects and you literally are like trying to contribute to that. Like that's it's, maybe a little risky, but if you are feeling confident about what you're doing, at the very least, it shows effort. It shows, that you're like, you understand, you did research about the company. Like these are all good things.
Yeah. And it shows your ability to communicate it well. I've had some people do this thing where they make a pull request to one of our repositories and the code isn't perfect, but then we get a little back and forth and I see, do they take notes? Are they able to kind of understand the communication I'm giving them about concerns I have about their thing and then make the adjustments and then fix it? Because that's what coding is like at a company. It's not being perfect all the time. It's communication and collaboration.
And we should put a plug in. I'll put something in the notes for this video. Titan has an excellent blog post, how to write a good or a great PR. I forget what it is.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
If you just Google Titan how to write PR, I'm sure it'll come up. It's still very applicable. If you're watching this and you're like, oh, how do I write seriously, this will get you so much further than if you were just doing it, on your own.
Good memory.
Yeah. It's a good blog post.